Hi everyone! So we decided to do something a little bit different this month, and instead of a wrap-up with Karina, Sally, and I'm going to share my individual wrap-up with you instead. Now, I read a lot of books every month, and this month so far I have read 30 books, so I'm going to do a really quick review of each book for you, like a couple sentences and my star rating, and we're going to get through a lot of books. So these books are in the order I read them in January, and the first book I finished in 2018 is Bloodmere by Brent Weeks. This is the fourth book in his Lightbringer series. This is an epic fantasy series. It's not my favorite fantasy series. This is a world in which color and light are power, but the more a person uses their power, the more it negatively affects their life. It's an interesting premise, enough so that I will continue to keep reading the series. But I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Next up, I read Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. Now, this was our December book pick for Owl Crate, and I absolutely loved this book. I was expecting to read it 1 week at a time, but as soon as I started reading, I knew I had to finish it in one sitting. It is a funny, contemporary book about a girl named Claudia who accidentally overhears the breakup of the school's kind of it couple and kind of the repercussions that happen after that. It's cute, it's funny, it's swoon-worthy, and I just absolutely loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I have another gigantic book, and this is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. Now, this is a book that I've had on my TBR for literally years, and I decided to knock it off first thing in 2018. This won the Man Booker Prize back in 2013. And I've heard really amazing things about it. I had no idea what it's about, but it's actually a historical fiction novel that is set in New Zealand during the Gold Rush. Now, I will say I did find it quite dry at times, and I didn't absolutely love it. I kind of slogged through to the end. I think it's like an 800-page book, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. Next, I finished The Ship Beyond Time by Heidi Heilig. I really liked The Girl from Everywhere last year, so I was very excited to finish this duology off. It is a wonderful fantasy story about time-traveling pirates, basically. I'm not going to say too much more than that, but I love the characters in here. This is such an interesting and fascinating world, and it's just the way that Heidi Heilig has been able to like weave together different times and different places in the world is just so fantastic. If you like duologies, this is definitely one to pick up. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Next, I picked up another book that I've been looking forward to reading for a very long time, and that is Wolf by Ryan Graudin. This is an alternative history book in which Hitler won the Second World War, and there is a motorcycle race in here in which if you win the race, you get to meet Hitler, and our main character enters the race in hopes of being able to meet Hitler and then murder him at the end. This is a duology. I haven't read the second book yet, but I really liked this one. It's super fast-paced and very fun, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. Next up, I read The False Prince by Jennifer A. Nielsen. I found this at the thrift store, and it's a book that I've heard about for a long time and has a really good review, so I decided on a whim to pick it up. So this book, we follow an orphan who is purchased by kind of a con man who takes him in an effort to train him to impersonate the kingdom's missing prince. There's 4 boys that he's trying to train to take on this role, and it's just, I think this one really straddles the line between middle grade and YA really well. I think readers of both ages would really like it. I thought it was a really, really fun story, and I definitely will be continuing on with the series, and I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I picked up this mystery thriller, The Telling by Alexandra Sirowy. Karina read this book for Spookathon a couple years ago and really liked it, so I decided to pick it up. I unfortunately didn't like it as much. It is about a girl whose stepbrother mysteriously is murdered quite brutally, to be honest, and then she joins this kind of new group of friends, and it's about her kind of trying to come to terms with what happened to her stepbrother. I will say I didn't like any of the characters. I found most of them unlikable and not in like a fun way, in a way that I didn't appreciate. The story was very readable, and I definitely like flew through it, but I only gave it 2.5 stars. Next, I have Pathfinder by Orson Scott Card. Now, I've owned this book for multiple years. It's just kind of been sitting on my shelf, and I finally decided to get into it, and unfortunately, this is another one that I really didn't like. It is about a boy who can see the paths of people who have been there before him. So that premise to me sounded really interesting. Unfortunately, this has like a weird kind of time travel sci-fi element to it that was just overly complicated. Like, I found myself being really confused at times, and I just didn't really connect with this book at all, especially for a book that's, you know, well over 600 pages long. I didn't feel any connection to it, so I definitely won't be continuing on with the series, and I gave it 2 stars. Next up, I have Transmission by Harry Kunzru. This one really took me by surprise. I found it randomly at a thrift store and didn't know what it was about, but when I looked it up when I got home, it actually had like fairly poor ratings on Goodreads, but I decided to read it anyways, and I actually ended up enjoying it quite a lot. It is about an Indian man who moves to Silicon Valley to become a coder, like a web developer, and he accidentally releases like a virus on the computer that kind of has implications all over the world. It's quite smart. It's you know, I definitely love the story. I love our main character Arjun, and I just think it surprised me. And it was one of those situations where the reviews on Goodreads, the star ratings don't necessarily aren't definitive. Like, I think this has a low 3 rating, and I ended up really enjoying it and giving it 3.5 stars. Next, I have By Your Side by Kasie West. Now, I really enjoy Kasie West's books. I've read several of them now, but I think this one's probably my least favorite, simply because it didn't really make sense to me. It's a fun story about a girl who gets locked in a library over a weekend, and in the library with her is kind of the boy from the wrong side of the tracks. Now, in this modern day and age, that whole plot point just like didn't make any sense, that nobody would find them for an entire weekend and there was no landlines in a public library. So like I really just had some problems with the plot, and I couldn't suspend my disbelief. So it is a fun book. There are some plot holes. I would definitely, if you like Kasie West, I would definitely still read it, but I only gave it 2 stars. So next up, I have Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Now, it was one of my goals for this year to finish the rest of Neil Gaiman's work that I had yet to read, so I picked up this one because everybody seems to love this book. Now, this is a book about when Armageddon is impending. It follows an angel named Crowley and a demon named Aziraphale, and their kind of efforts to stop Armageddon from happening. It's very silly, and I definitely understand why people do like this book, but I don't think Terry Pratchett's humor is necessarily for me. I read his book The Color of Magic last year, and again I enjoyed it, but not as much as people seem to think I would. I'm glad to have read this book, and I know there's a miniseries I believe, coming out of this soon with David Tennant in it, which should be interesting. So I like the story, but the storytelling wasn't my favorite. The storytelling wasn't my favorite, but I did end up giving it 3.5 stars. Next up, from the library, I picked up Feed by M.T. Anderson. I actually picked this up because it was recommended to me in like a Vlogbrothers video, a John Green video like years ago. And this is a dystopian novel set in a world in which people have basically like live streams and feeds in their minds of things, and things are constantly being advertised to them and stuff like that. It's very, you know, it's definitely like dystopian fiction, you know, where's society going? I think had I read this several years ago when it came out, I think it came out in 2012 or something, I would have enjoyed it more because it would have felt a lot newer, but this is definitely a story I've seen before. It didn't wow me. I did enjoy reading it. It was fairly, the writing style itself was unique, but I only gave it 2.5 stars. Next, I picked up this wonderful novel, Moxie by Jennifer Mathieu. Now, this book got so much buzz last year, and for such good reason. I loved this book. It is a contemporary story all about girls kind of taking back their power. It has just a strong focus on females coming together and not taking crap from the, you know, from the administration at their school, from their parents, from their peers. And just taking back their own safety, basically. It has great discussions about consent and, you know, why tradition isn't always a thing that needs to be upheld. There was moments in here that had me tearing up because I just felt like so empowered and like connected to these characters. And, you know, the tagline in here is Moxie Girls Fight Back, and I just love this. I absolutely devoured it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next, I picked up North of Happy by Adi Alsaid, and I've read Adi Alsaid's previous 2 novels and really enjoyed them, so I wanted to pick up this one as well, and I think this one is by far my favorite. This is about a Mexican kid who, after the passing of his brother, kind of feels lost in life and decides to essentially run away to a small island in the Pacific Northwest on a whim to visit one of the restaurants his brother had previously visited on his travels. Carlos is the main character, and he's obsessed with food and cooking, and he ends up getting a job at this restaurant, first as a dishwasher, and it just explores his life on this small Pacific Northwest island, dealing with grief and loss and making new friends and kind of making it on his own without his overbearing parents. And I just thought it was very well done. If you've ever worked in a kitchen, which I spent many years working in kitchens, this is kind of resonates as well because they use all of the fun kitchen terminology. It's also set in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I worked in a kitchen. So it's all of this kind of came together to make a book that really spoke to me. Definitely recommend it. His writing is so much fun, and I gave this 4 stars. Next up, I have another surprising read, and that is The Epic Crush of Genie Lo by F.C.V. This wasn't a book that was really on my radar until somebody recommended it to me on Twitter, and I decided to pick it up, and it was really fun. So this is about a girl named Genie Lo, who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area and is, completely dedicated into getting good grades and getting into a good, an Ivy League college, until one day a boy named Quentin shows up and tells her that she is actually a creature from Chinese mythology. So she and Quentin kind of pair up to fight these random demons that have all of a sudden taken over the San Francisco Bay Area. It's quite silly, but I loved the interwovenness of the mythology, and then just Genie Lo trying to still be normal. Like, she has this kind of superhero life where she's literally giant, and then Quentin, who is the Monkey King from Chinese mythology, and it was just so much fun. It's definitely silly, but I really, really enjoyed my time reading it, and I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Next up, I have a fairly intense read, and that is The Sacred Lies of Minnow Bly by Stephanie Oakes. This is another book that I wanted to read for quite a long time since it was released, and again, I didn't really know anything about it. So in this mystery thriller book, we follow a girl named Minnow Bly who is found by police having brutally beaten a teenager, and the interesting thing about Minnow right off the bat is she is missing her hands. She has escaped from a very reclusive cult, and before leaving this cult, her father cut off her hands. This book takes place in a juvenile detention center where she is serving time until she can be go on parole or be admitted into an adult facility for the beating of this boy. And it really explores her life, what happened in this cult, in this just vile environment that she was raised in, but still believes in because that's where she was raised. It's very dark. It's very gruesome. It's definitely not for the light of heart, but I really enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. On an entirely different note, I have My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. I only picked this up again because I saw it at the thrift store and I decided, why not? This is a very new release. It only came out last year. And it's just a fun contemporary book about a girl trying to fake her way of living a perfect life in London. She has this amazing Instagram account where she's always posting cool pictures, but in reality she lives in a terrible flat with awful roommates, makes basically no money, can't afford to eat out ever, but that's definitely not what she puts on for social media. It was really fun. It was a really fun book. It's definitely not deep, but Sophie Kinsella is always something nice to read if you just want to feel happy, and I gave this one 3 stars. Next up, I have The Illegal by Lawerence Hill. Now, I was supposed to buddy read this with Sally, but we kind of ended up going on very different schedules, and I ended up finishing it quite a bit before her. I'm not a very good buddy reader, but I loved this book. I was pleasant. I knew it was going to be really excellent writing because Lawerence Hill is known for having excellent writing, but I was floored by how much I liked the story. It's a quite intense book about a boy named Keita who grew up on one of the world's poorest nations, Zantoro Land, which is an island. And on Zantoro Land, your only really claim to fame is if you're a really good runner, because that can kind of be a ticket out of there for you. So Keita has grown up running, and he is discovered by a marathon agent named Anton Ham, and Anton Ham brings him kind of to the mainland off Zantoro Land to run marathons for him and earn him money. But this mainland called Freedom State, as soon as Keita runs his first race, he just keeps running and he escapes it kind of eludes Anton Ham and moves to Africtown and starts to try to live his own life and earn money to help his sister. It's, again, like I said, it's quite intense, but it's also quite funny and silly at times, and I really appreciated the look on this, like the weird kind of dichotomies we have in immigration. The places in this book aren't real. They were written in such a way that I'm like, does this place exist? Like, this place could exist. But it was also, I really liked the small allusions to, there's a lot of Canadian things. Like, it seems like in this world, Canada is kind of a superpower. Because Lawerence Hill's Canadian, and so like they'll go get a Tim's instead of, you know, going to any other coffee shop. So so much in here I really, really liked, and if you're hesitant to pick it up, I say pick it up. It's really readable, and I absolutely flew through this one, and I gave it 5 stars. Next, I have my first reread of 2018, and that is The Last Olympian by Riordan. I have been going back and kind of randomly rereading the Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus series. And this is the last book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and I just love this. These books are popular for such a good reason. Like, this is a middle grade book, but I just absolutely love all of these characters. I love getting back into this world. I think I could reread it again and again, and I wouldn't get bored. And so for my first reread, obviously a successful one, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I have another kind of Riordan book, and that is The Lost Hero graphic novel. I have reread other books in this series late in 2017, but I didn't actually reread The Lost Hero because it's not my favorite one in the series. I'd say it's probably my least favorite of all of the Percy Jackson books, mostly because it doesn't really have Percy in it. But I do like it. But I found the graphic novel form on Book Outlet. I thought this would be a really fun thing to have in my collection, and I read it and I liked it and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I have my second Neil Gaiman book of the year, and that is Stardust, and this is definitely what it says, a fairy tale for grown-ups. This is about a boy named Tristan who, while he is courting kind of what he thinks is the love of his life, they witness a falling star, and he vows to her that he is going to retrieve that falling star, and in exchange she will marry him. And that is just, it's kind of his adventure to find this star and bringing it back. I really loved this charming little book, and it's definitely like a classic kind of Neil Gaiman writing. I listened to the audiobook of it actually, and it's read by Neil Gaiman. And yeah, I really liked it and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I have The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapena. Now Sally, Karina, and I all read There's Someone Inside Your House for Spookathon last year, and none of us liked it that much. But I decided to pick up this book anyways. I had it on my TBR, and I didn't love it still, but I definitely liked it better than the other book. And this is about a couple who, while next door, their baby goes missing. And it's kind of just, it's a mystery thriller. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's kind of the exploration into what happened to this baby, and he's as the baby that was clearly abducted from their house. So I did like this one better than A Stranger in the House. Still not my favorite thing ever, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next up, I have my first classic of the year, and that is The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. Now this is actually a series of short stories. I'm kind of all set in the same world, and I was pleasantly surprised by this. I think the reason I mostly liked it is because Disney actually references this directly quite a lot, which you don't often see in Disney. So a lot of the phrases and things that they were saying in here are actually in Disney songs, so it kind of made it fun to read. I will say there were a couple stories I didn't love. I really liked Rikki Tikki Tavi and the story about Mowgli, and yeah, this is just, it's fun. If you like classic short stories, I think this is really readable, and you should probably pick it up. I end up giving this little collection 3 stars. Next, I read Since You Asked by Maureen Gu. I picked this up on a whim at a library book sale, and it just seemed like I was kind of in a contemporary mood a little bit this month, so I thought it would be fun. I wanted to read Maureen Gu's more recent book, and I think this is her debut. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very well executed debut in my opinion. It's about a girl who works at her school newspaper and accidentally publishes a fake article she wrote that criticizes her school, and through this article she actually gets hired on to write kind of more sassy columns basically about her school traditions for her school newspaper. It was fun, but the way it was written was just not to my taste. Like, a lot of the editing kind of choices seemed weird to me. One thing that really annoyed me is the use of multiple exclamation marks at the end of sentences for really no reason. Like, it's just grammatically strange. Like, it's not like she's a teenager writing something. Like, that would happen in like the middle of a scene. And it really like just jarred me. So I didn't love this. I have high hopes for Maringu's other books, and I gave this one 2 stars. Next up, I read First and Then by Emma Mills. Having read Foolish Hearts and absolutely loved it earlier in the month, I had to pick up another book by her. This is her debut book, and I really enjoyed this one as well. In here, we follow a girl named Devin, who recently, because of kind of some sad situations, her parents have taken in her younger cousin Foster, who is a freshman in her school. Through extenuating circumstances, Foster, who is kind of small and geeky and nerdy and spends way too much time with Devin, in her opinion, actually gets recruited to be the kicker on the varsity football team. Through this boy named Ezra, who's kind of like the all-star football player, you know, he's the most popular guy in school, and in Devin's opinion, he's kind of a dick. So, and this kind of is their, it's like a fun high school contemporary romance, you know, hate to love relationship, and I really enjoyed it. Foster is a little cinnamon roll. I love him, and I just think Emma Mills is just gonna be an auto by author for me for sure. As I debut, this was super solid, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I have Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, and this is a non-fiction kind of business book about the man who created Zappos. Now, I actually didn't have any idea what Zappos was going into this, but apparently it's quite famous. So this is a kind of inspiring business book all about how Tony Hsieh went from being this kind of kid with an unsatisfied kid with a paper route to being part of this like huge billion-dollar company. It's all about their company's approach to really putting customer service first, and, you know, treating the people they work with just so much respect and, you know, like familiarity almost. And they call it the Zappos culture, and it is just kind of like, it makes you see customer service in a different way. And Karina gave this to all of us girls here at Owl Crate to read and kind of inspire us to just, you know, be better in any way that we possibly can. And I quite enjoyed it. I didn't love every part of it, but I still definitely got the message and felt inspired after, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I have what is probably my most disappointing read of January, and that is I Crawl Through It by A.S. King. I've read 5 other A.S. King books and quite enjoyed all of them. I know her writing is weird, so I wasn't expecting this book to be weird, but this book was beyond weird. I really just didn't get it. Like, for example, there are 4 different points of view in here, I believe, and there's like there's a boy who's building an invisible helicopter that this girl can only see on Tuesdays, and some people can see it other days of the week, and some people can never see it. And if he's sitting in it, he looks like he's floating in air. There's a naked man in a bush trying to sell them like physical letters that he's made out of something, and he sells them lemonade that's been spiked with roofies, and they go to an island where there's arrivals but there can never be any departures, and their helicopter fuel is made from tears, and it's like, what? Like, it's just, the whole time I was like, what? Like, I just have no words. I'm sure this book is for some people will like this, but it was just way too heavy-handed in the metaphor for me. Didn't like it. I rounded it up to a generous 2 stars. Next up, I have another very popular mystery thriller, and that is The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. This is about a girl named Mia who mysteriously goes missing, and, you know, the search to get her back. I didn't love it. I was entertained. There's definitely like a strong case of Stockholm Syndrome going on in here. But yeah, I was entertained. I kept flipping the pages. I feel that way about a lot of mystery thrillers. They just kind of feel, you know, they are obviously very formulaic. But I enjoyed my time reading it. Another one that was wildly popular, so I'm glad to have checked it out, but I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I have Unscripted Joss Bird by Ligia de Pennaflor, and I picked this up on a whim, no spoilers, we got this for a video that will be coming out soon. But this was a contemporary story following a 12-year-old girl working on a movie set. Now I was kind of surprised by this. I didn't know anything about it when I picked it up, but I did know kind of just from the synopsis that it was about a girl on a movie set. But I didn't realize she was 12 because this was from the YA section at the bookstore. So it felt like this book was trying to, it's definitely not middle grade. Like the content in here is more mature. You know, there's violence, there's some drinking, there's, you know, her mother has an affair with the director of the film. Like it's definitely, the content itself is definitely more YA, but it felt like it struggled. Like it just felt like it was missing something because you don't connect to the character because she's 12. Which again, that's not necessarily the case. I can read from 12-year-old perspective, but this one just didn't feel quite done in quite a way that I really liked. The story itself was fine. It was quite sad. The movie they're making is a very tragic story about abuse. But I hated her mother. Her mother was like total stage mom, and it's never resolved. Like you kind of get to the end of the book and nothing's changed. You know, their relationship isn't better, you know, nothing's improved or gotten worse, or it's just nothing. It felt like nothing happened. It's like a very slice of life, I guess. And I was just expecting a little bit more, you know, just a bit more to go down. Like the relationships didn't evolve in here, which is kind of unusual. I didn't hate it. It was a really quick read. It's only about 200 pages, but I only gave it 2.5 stars. And finally, I picked up A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Now, quite oddly, actually, I actually picked this up for the first time ever and started reading it literally hours before I found out that Ursula K. Le Guin had passed away, which was just kind of a very strange twist of fate. And you know, it's very sad for the book community to lose this just such an awesome presence in the book community. But I did really enjoy this. It is a 300-page book that follows a boy named Jed, and I just can't even really get into the details. So much happens in this book. Like, I feel like this book could be like 3 books, and it's only 300 pages long. But I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to read more from Ursula K. Le Guin and kind of celebrate her works more. The only other books by her I've read were her children's series called Cat Wings about flying cats, which is excellent if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, I loved that when I was a kid, so I'm really excited to get into this kind of, this is definitely like a classic in YA fantasy, and it was really good, and can't wait to read more from it, and I gave it 4 stars. Alright, so that was the 30 books that I managed to finish in January. Yes, I know it's a lot of books. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, I spent a lot of time reading and commuting, but this was really fun to do. I've never done a wrap-up of all the books I've read in a month before. Let me know if you liked seeing this, because it was fun to do. I do know that not all of my ratings were super high, but I think overall it was a great reading month. For me to give a 5-star to a book, I really have had to love it. So this is a pretty average reading month for me, I would say. But yeah, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome. Bye!